A western so violent nuns fled the theater. Another got buried by the studio because they thought it was disgusting. And one had Bogart playing the nastiest bastard of his career. These are Roger Ebert's 15 greatest westerns of all time. When John Huston came back from the war and Humphrey Bogart was a star big enough to choose his next project, the two of them chose to make a film about a seedy loser driven mad by greed. Two down-on-their-luck Americans searching for work. In 1920s, Mexico convinced an old prospector to help them mine for gold in the Sierra Madre Mountains. Bogart himself literally shouted to a critic outside a New York nightclub, "Wait till you see me in my next picture. I play the worst shit you ever saw." And he wasn't kidding. This movie is bleak. The nicest guy in the whole thing dies trying to save men who were about to kill him. And the ending isn't just unhappy. It's like a cosmic joke at the hero's expense. Studio boss Jack L. Warner, the guy who funded the film and then panicked when the budget spiraled out of control, actually called it the greatest motion picture we have ever made. And Roger Ebert agreed too. He summed it up perfectly. The movie has never really been about gold, but about character, and Bogart fearlessly makes Fred C. Dobbs into a pathetic, frightened, selfish man. So sick we would be tempted to pity him if he were not so undeserving of pity. By this point, Clint Eastwood knows his own screen presence better than anyone. His silences, his expressions. He barely needs to do anything, and you still feel it. And Pale Rider is the perfect example of that. On the surface, this is a classic Western. Small mining town, independent miners trying to stake their claim, corrupt landowners trying to force them out. And right into the middle of this whole mess rides Eastwood, and sure, we've seen versions of this story before, but what makes Pale Rider work is how much it understands Eastwood's presence. Some of the greatest Westerns come from directors who just got their lead actor's energy. Think John Ford with John Wayne, Henry Fonda. And here, Eastwood is both the lead and the director. He'd already directed himself 9 times before this, so he knows exactly how to use his own screen presence to make the movie resonate. That's why Roger Ebert called it a considerable achievement, a classic Western of style and excitement. Tommy Lee Jones didn't just star in this one, he directed it. And not only that, a lot of it was actually shot on his own ranch. That's how personal this movie was for him. Jones plays Pete Perkins, a hard-nosed ranch foreman who hires an undocumented cowboy. The two become close friends until the cowboy is killed in a stupid, senseless shooting involving a rookie Border Patrol agent. And when Pete realizes that the sheriff is just going to sweep it under the rug, he takes justice into his own hands. The movie won Best Screenplay at Cannes, and Jones took home Best Actor. But outside of that, it got ignored. Total box office flop. Budget was $15 million, and it barely made $13.5 million back. And yet, Roger Ebert saw something in it. He said it told the kind of story that John Huston or Sam Peckinpah might have wanted to film. A movie that starts with that rock-solid foundation of loyalty and honor between men, and then throws in just a little madness. And in a time when action movies casually rack up body counts in the hundreds, this one slows down and takes the time to honor a single life. Another Western that won Best Picture at the Oscars. And this was a passion project for Kevin Costner. He directed it, he starred in it, and he was so determined to make it happen that he even put up some of his own money. The story follows Union Army Lieutenant John Dunbar, who basically chooses death over amputation and rides straight into enemy fire. But instead of dying, he ends up at a remote outpost where he gradually becomes part of a Sioux tribe. Ebert loved this movie. He said it had the kind of vision and ambition that's rare in movies today. It wasn't a formula Western. It was thoughtful, carefully observed. And for Costner, it was a massive personal triumph. The guy had been in Silverado years earlier just because he wanted to be in a Western, and now had directed one of the best Westerns Ebert had ever seen. And then the Oscars came along and basically confirmed it. There are some people who can get away with anything. Mel Brooks, he's one of those guys. Blazing Saddles is him at his most unfiltered, his most outrageous, and it works. Roger Ebert called it a crazed grab bag of a movie that does everything to keep us laughing except hit us over the head with a rubber chicken. And he was right. The setup is simple. Shady land speculators want to run a railroad through a small town, and to drive the residents out, they send in a black sheriff, thinking the townspeople will revolt. The structure is a total mess. The jokes are all over the place, and yes, one of those jokes was literally just the sound of audible farts, which, funnily enough, almost got the whole movie scrapped. Mel Brooks later told the story about that first studio screening. Executives sat down, watched the film, and hated it. One of them actually stood up and said, "Well, I suggest we eat the picture. Let's bury this. It's disgusting. I don't want Warner's name on this." They were ready to kill it right then and there. But somehow the movie managed to slip out into a handful of cities with almost no marketing. And then, it exploded. By the time it left theaters, it was one of the highest-grossing comedies of all time. Only the 10th movie in history to cross $100 million at the box office. It even scored 3 Academy Award nominations. This movie was a game-changer. It pretty much destroyed the old-school, romanticized Western. We're talking about a film that used 90,000 rounds of ammo. Warner Brothers even had this wild promotional line. More ammunition was used in that final battle than in the entire Mexican Revolution. Director Sam Peckinpah, people called him Bloody Sam for a reason, wanted to take the Hollywood version of movie violence, rip it apart, and show audiences something they couldn't just shrug off. He said he wanted violence in movies to stop being fun, to make people feel how ugly it actually is. And it worked. There were walkouts at screenings. Nuns ran out of theaters. One guy was so furious he actually wrote a letter to his congressman. Roger Ebert called this the most violent movie ever made. He said that despite how real the violence looks, the film constantly reminds you that it's a movie. It's hyper-stylized, extreme, almost operatic in its approach to violence. And that's why it works. Arthur Penn's Little Big Man is what happens when you take a classic Western and turn it inside out. It's revisionist, it's satirical, and at times, it's just straight up hilarious. Roger Ebert called it an endlessly entertaining attempt to spin an epic in the form of a yarn. And that's exactly what it is. Dustin Hoffman plays Jack Crabb, this guy who spends his life bouncing between white and Cheyenne society, never fully fitting into either. He's raised as a Cheyenne, becomes a gunslinger, does medicine shows, scouts for the cavalry, even survives Custer's last stand. And through his story, the film takes all these familiar Western tropes and flips them on their head. Arthur Penn, the director, was best known for making movies about people shooting and cutting each other up. That's how he described his own work. But this movie proves he was so much more than that. This one is a quiet Western. Not about gunslingers or outlaws, but working cowboys just trying to survive in a world that's leaving them behind. Lee Marvin plays Monte Walsh, a cowboy who realizes the West he knew is disappearing, and that soon there's not going to be a place for guys like him. Jack Palance is here too, playing against type for once. He's not the villain this time. Instead, he's Monte's best friend, and their friendship is one of the best things about the movie. Back in 1970, critics were split on this. Gene Siskel hated it. He gave it 1 star. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars and called it as lovely a Western as I've seen in a long time. This was the directorial debut of William Fraker, a legendary cinematographer. And while history remembers him for his work behind the camera, he shot over 40 films and got 5 Oscar nominations. Monte Walsh shows that he had a real touch as a director too. Unfortunately, the movie didn't do well at the box office, and after a couple more films, Fraker was pushed back into cinematography. Robert Altman called this an anti-Western, and Roger Ebert called it perfect. A lot of directors spend their entire careers chasing perfection, but according to Ebert, Altman actually got there with this one. He said that out of all the great films Altman made, McCabe and Mrs. Miller was the one that was flawless. One of the saddest films he'd ever seen. Just this deep, aching yearning for love and home that never comes. The story's about a gambler and a prostitute who become business partners in a remote mining town. Their operation starts thriving, but then a big corporation rolls in, and suddenly they're up against forces way bigger than them. The film is visually stunning too. There's a shot early on of McCabe lighting a cigar before crossing a bridge, and Stanley Kubrick actually called Altman just to ask him, "How did you know you had it?" That's the level of craft we're talking about. It was nominated for an Oscar, but still somehow remains one of the most underrated films of the 1970s. The American Film Institute ranks it as the 8th greatest Western ever made. Johnny Guitar might have been a cheap Republic Pictures Western, but it was also something way more interesting than that. On the surface, it's a standard setup. Joan Crawford plays a tough saloon owner who helps a wounded outlaw and then gets wrongly accused of murder and robbery by a lynch mob. But underneath all that, the film is weird, quirky, political, twisted. Ebert even called it one of the boldest, most stylized films of its time. The production itself was a complete disaster. The director was so miserable that he said he had to stop the car and throw up before work every morning. Sterling Hayden, who played Johnny Guitar, didn't care for the movie either. He straight up admitted, "They put string over my guitar in case I accidentally hit the strings. I can't play guitar and I can't sing a good goddamn either." He also said he spent his days fighting with Joan Crawford and his nights fighting with his wife. When Peter Bogdanovich needed the final movie to play in the Last Picture Show, he picked Red River, and for good reason. This is one of the greatest westerns ever made. Roger Ebert said that when the film stays focused on its central story, the cattle drive, the generational clash between an older man and a younger one, it's as good as the genre gets. John Wayne plays Tom Dunson, a rancher who sets out on the first cattle drive down the Chisholm Trail. Montgomery Clift plays Matt, the younger man he clashes with. And right away you can feel the tension, not just between the characters but between the actors themselves. Wayne was old-school Hollywood, started acting in 1929. Clift was method, completely different energy. If there's one thing people hold against Red River, it's that ending. The film builds up this huge psychological rivalry between Wayne and Clift. And then, in the final moments, a woman steps in and breaks it all up. Clift hated that. He thought it turned the whole showdown into a joke. But still, the film's got some legendary moments, like that montage of weathered cowboy faces as they drive the herd forward. Ebert called it one of the most quintessentially Western images ever filmed. Howard Hawks hadn't made a movie in 4 years. After Land of the Pharaohs flopped in 1955, he thought maybe he'd lost it. He was 62 when he came back to direct Rio Bravo, his 41st film, and he was so nervous on the first day of shooting that he literally had to step behind a set and throw up. Then, he walked out and directed an absolute masterpiece. This is easily one of the best collaborations between Howard Hawks and John Wayne. Wayne plays John T. Chance, a small-town sheriff who arrests a rancher for murder. The problem? That rancher's brother is a powerful, ruthless landowner who's willing to do anything to break him out. The town is on edge, Chance is outnumbered, and the threats just keep building. Roger Ebert summed it up perfectly. To watch Rio Bravo is to see a master craftsman at work. The film is seamless. There is not a shot that is wrong. It is uncommonly absorbing, and the 141-minute running time flows past like running water. And he's right. It's a movie that just feels effortless. Everything works. It's a textbook example of a Western done right. Shane is one of those movies that looks simple on the surface. Good guy, bad guy, classic Western showdown. Alan Ladd plays Shane, a former gunslinger who just wants to live a quiet life. And of course, trouble finds him. But if you really sit with it, there's so much more going on. George Stevens, the director, really wanted to show the real impact of violence, and he even came up with technical tricks to make gunfights feel more brutal. This was actually one of the first movies to use hidden stunt wires to yank people backward when they got shot, making the deaths look more explosive and shocking. And that completely changed how Westerns were filmed afterward. Even Sam Peckinpah, who made The Wild Bunch, pointed to Shane as a turning point. He said, "When Jack Palance shot Elisha Cook in Shane, things started to change." There have been a ton of movies about the gunfight at the OK Corral. Tombstone, Wyatt Earp, gunfight at the OK Corral. And usually, the showdown is the whole point. But My Darling Clementine is different. John Ford doesn't make this about just the violence. The gunfight is there, sure, but the movie spends way more time on the little moments. Wyatt Earp getting a haircut, sitting on a porch thinking about Clementine. Henry Fonda plays Earp, and instead of being just the tough lawman, he's got this warmth, this quiet charm. You actually feel how much he wants to settle down, but the world around him won't let him. And Roger Ebert really loved this about the film. He once said, "My Darling Clementine must be one of the sweetest and most good-hearted of all westerns. The giveaway is the title, which is not about Wyatt or Doc or the gunfight, but about Clementine, certainly the most important thing to happen to Marshal Earp during the story."